In this study, we're going to take a look at the Arm Across Guillotine, also known as the Seated Kata-Gatame. It's a high percentage submission from the front headlock, demonstrated here by Saulo Ribeiro in 2007, that has recently come to prominence again due to a series of high-profile wins. The entry and setup resembles a traditional Arm-In Guillotine mixed with an Anaconda choke, but with the opponent's arm trapped across the same side as their body. And that will put the opponent's arm against your hip and into the same finishing position as an arm triangle. The name of Seated Kata-Gatame now makes sense, as the finishing mechanics from here more resemble an arm triangle than a guillotine. It can be set up from guard by transitioning to octopus guard, as you see Dean Thomas demonstrate here, but more commonly it will be set up from the front headlock position, where you would use a gable grip to bring the arm across as if you were setting up an Anaconda choke, but then you place your knee on the other side of the arm to lock it off and sit back for the finish as if you were going for a guillotine choke. You would then lock up either a half guard, full guard, or bring the knee across onto the inside to stop the opponent from being able to posture and turn. You then have to punch the choking arm as high as possible, preferably clearing the opponent's shoulder. Another common setup we'll see is from riding the side or back position. We'll see Ben Askren here use punches to open up the space to connect his hands together before sitting back for the choke. But anytime you're on side or back and have the seatbelt grip, you can use the space occupied by that seatbelt grip to switch hands quickly and move into the choking configuration, and then that puts you in good position to use your inside knee to slide down the back of the opponent and trap their arm for the choke. Although one risk from here, if you don't have control of the opponent's lower body, is that they'll be able to slide over the top and jump, clearing themselves free of the choke. And one defense like this that was demonstrated expertly by Jack Array against Jack Hermanson was when he slid his back away from Jack and placed it onto the mat, relieving the choke. And while it's a great defense, this is also where some excellent transitions from this attack start to develop, like a transition into the back, which is essentially a 100% sweep. And if they rolled through all the way, you can transition up onto mount, as we see Ryan Hall do here. And while in MMA you do have the additional option to remove this ability to escape by finishing with the open side up against the fence, preventing the roll, if they do roll, you also have other excellent finishing options, like switching immediately to the Anaconda choke, as the arms are already in position and it just requires a changing of the grips. You also have the option of rolling through with the opponent and landing in mount to finish the choke as they attempt the escape, and this really highlights the finishing mechanics of the Seated Kata-Gatame, as you drive your hips into the trapped arm of the opponent like an arm triangle. And while you still can finish by crunching in like a guillotine, I've found much more success by finishing with the hip drive method. And it's here I want to talk about something a bit more experimental, as this position already has a name in Judo, where it's called the Kata-Sankaku and used to score pins. And it's also used in wrestling, where a strong advocate for it is Ben Askren, who's named it the Assassin Pin. And while Ben Askren did go there from MMA a couple of times, he never successfully completed a choke. But its use in wrestling is a great way to demonstrate the effectiveness of the technique, as it's used to turn and pin multiple resisting opponents, and we can also look to it for inspiration on how to make those turns and pins successful while adding the choking details. And its use in Judo further confirms this, as anytime we can find a technique that works under multiple combat sports rule sets, we know it's worth investing our time into. But here in folk style wrestling, we'll see a wrestler apply the assassin and actually get a submission tap from it. So while submissions aren't allowed in folk style wrestling, he was still able to get the tap from the assassin pin. And this is where I'd like to draw attention to Lucas Brennan, who was able to use this position in Bellator MMA to get the tap out by going to the assassin and hooking the near leg while hipping in, which opens up the possibility of additional transitions and finishing options like one we see Chael Sonnen perform here to add to the Seated Kata-Gatame game. If you'd like to check out part of the transition I mentioned earlier to the 100% choke, that video's on the screen, and please subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if you'd seen that assassin transition before or any other ideas you have for the move.